Nations, through its Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, the UNISDR, observes World Tsunami Awareness Day on November 5th. The first observance on Saturday, November 5th, 2016, focused namely on educational awareness activities in small island states and coastal communities. Most tsunamis are triggered by earthquakes, and the Caribbean is one of the regions prone to earthquakes. So what is the likely impact of a tsunami on the Caribbean?
We may not have had this big dramatic earthquake with tsunami in the Eastern Caribbean as you would have seen maybe in the Northern Caribbean. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen. And the point is that given how we have developed, given the tourist industries in the various territories, the high density populations we have in coastal regions now, when such an event occurs, the impact is going to be huge.
In October, the UNISDR held a one-day conference in Trinidad and Tobago as a precursor to the first observance of World Tsunami Awareness Day, with the main objective being bringing awareness to the risks associated with tsunamis for the Caribbean.
I'm fully in support of our member states really going down the pathway of putting in all of the various elements to be classified as a tsunami-ready community and by extension tsunami-ready states. Part of that process involves interventions that will benefit not just for tsunami readiness, but the broader hazard readiness for floods, earthquakes, you name it. It involves communities being organized and mobilized. That is also one of the focus of the CDM strategy, which is looking at community resilience building. We have to look also at the institutional arrangements for warning and disseminating the warning. So those are areas within the context of the legislation, the model legislation that CDM has developed, the model policies that we have developed, the advocacy we are engaging in, and future programs we are seeking to develop that will seek to address the early warning system issues, but within a comprehensive way.
The Caribbean has been put on alert for a major earthquake, and the concerns are heightened as seismologists in the seismology unit of the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus says the region is ripe for a major earthquake.
Sometimes some of the research that we are doing at the Seismic Research Center suggests to us that you can analyze how these earthquakes are occurring, these smaller earthquakes are occurring, and get a sense of when a bigger earthquake might occur. Some research would describe it as accelerating seismicity. You see an increase in certain magnitudes of certain events. And in some areas in the Eastern Caribbean, we are seeing elevation in some of our activity. And in others, we are seeing it quiet, which is another sign that something might be preparing. So at this time in the history of earthquakes in the Eastern Caribbean, given everything that I have said before, and given what we are seeing globally, because we are now seeing some of the biggest earthquakes that the system can generate since 2004. We have been seeing these very large earthquakes. So we should not be taking the seismic threat casually at all. We should be ensuring that our preparedness measures are in place.
Since most tsunamis are triggered by earthquakes, how ready are the countries of the Caribbean to deal with the threat or even the effects of a tsunami? Christopher Hildebrand Andrada, chair of the Intergovernmental Coordination Group for the Tsunami and Other Coastal Hazards Warning System for the Caribbean, says though there is a marginal level of awareness in the region, there is a deep sense of complacency. Sentiments echoed by other disaster risk management officials, including Ronald Jackson, director of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA.
I think because of what they saw the tsunami in the Indian Ocean did to those countries there. They saw the images of Japan of 2011. They've seen images of tsunami impact in Chile also among recent years. when you say a tsunami is coming, I think most people in the Caribbean understand that it is dangerous and they need to respond. What I think is required is many people probably still think that that's not going to happen in the Caribbean, since they have not seen it in their lifetime or heard about it from their parents. The most recent tsunami was devastating. Tsunami was in 1946 in Dominican Republic. So that is quite, a long time ago. So the fact that we haven't had a recent destructive tsunami, broadly destructive tsunami, Caribbean, has led to some complacency and some lack of knowledge within our communities. But I think the governments, are doing their job. They're integrating tsunamis in their all hazards education and outreach. So when we talk about hurricanes, we talk about earthquakes, we can talk about tsunamis, we talk about volcanoes. So by integrating tsunamis into their all hazards education will be important to make sure that people are cognizant that this is a real threat for the Caribbean. We've had 75 tsunamis in the past 500 years, and we have plenty of faults that could generate an earthquake, that could generate tsunamis, and people need to know that, and people need to get ready.
It's a very challenging road, I would say, because we find as people where we don't have the consistent experiences with these kinds of hazards. We lapse into a sense of complacency. It drifts very deep in our memories, and it's not only in the context of tsunamis. We've seen it in the case of hurricanes and storms. The farther you go away from the last event, more people tend to forget, and you will have a generation that has not experienced these things. And this is why storytelling is important. I use storytelling, but the broader context within which I use it is how we continue to educate our children, because they will grow into the adults of tomorrow that will really embody this culture, this risk management culture we're striving to achieve here with SEDIMA, with our partner states, participating states, and other partners. That's the only way we're going to change that whole landscape of how people react to risk, and in particular tsunamis.
Disaster management officials in the region are, however, ramping up efforts to increase awareness of the risks associated with tsunamis and to provide clear guidelines as to how to become tsunami smart. And a lot of the focus is on getting children involved in the education and awareness process. Across the Caribbean, a number of schools are built near coastlines, putting children who are among the most vulnerable in society at greater risk. As such, disaster managers are designing most of their tsunami awareness programs to target children.
The outcome of this project is that each of the schools involved in this project, by the end of this project, they should have tsunami plans. Also, they should have gone through the process of looking at the evacuation procedures, so tsunami school plan, evacuation plans, and also some signages. In terms of the community, they will also have community evacuation plan as it relates to tsunami. Also mapping done of the community, so you can probably, there'll be maps erected at different areas where you're here, and show you where you can evacuate in the event of a tsunami and so on, and also signages. And to top it all off, there will also be a public education and awareness campaign, because the project is really knowledge-based management and also community preparedness-based.
The Ministry of Education, as of earlier this year, employed an individual as a school safety coordinator. Actually, he was employed with the ministry, but he assumed the role of school safety coordinator. That is important because we recognize that we need to have plans for all of our schools, but that we need to ensure that the school children are very versed with issues pertaining to risk reduction and issues pertaining to disaster management. In that regard, this gentleman is not only responsible for looking at how we educate persons on those hazards, but also as it relates to the physical plant, which is the school itself, and how these can be designed in terms of layout and in terms of equipment to make sure that they can respond adequately, but also that they can prepare. So as part of that, what we're looking at is to ensure that somehow issues of risk reduction particular to the geohazards, particular to tsunami, is infused into the curriculum?
One of the things we have to try to work on is this whole idea of storytelling. How do we continue to educate our public, use opportunities like the Tsunami Awareness Day that is coming up November 5th, use National Disaster Preparedness Month activities, which some countries have, as an opportunity for going through a comprehensive suite of the hazards to which the Caribbean is vulnerable, and use that as an opportunity to talk about not just hurricanes and earthquakes, but also tsunamis and what can occur.
The communities and the schools are pretty interested in it, particularly when we would normally do a few sessions of public awareness before the actual evacuation drill. So we would normally go in and teach them the basics about tsunami science and earthquake science, as well as give them some examples of previous tsunamis. We normally show them a fairly moderate event, some footage from Chile, as well as the extreme Japan event, to show them what could be, what is likely, but what an extreme event would be, so that they can plan around that. So the footage normally brings out a lot of response, a lot of interest.
From 2011 to now, many activities were conducted, particularly in the north of the country, in the Cape Haitian, in Port-de-Paix, and for Liberty. There is no tsunami during this period, but there is a false warning in Port-de-Paix, in Cape Haitian, and recently in Jacmel, in the southeast of the country. And I think the response to the drill is quite good, because the population know when there is a tsunami, even if it is a false warning, the majority of population go to the mountain, to the high level.
So countries are taking tsunami awareness and preparedness a notch higher. They are working towards being certified as Tsunami Ready. Tsunami Readiness is a certification program of the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, which seeks to help communities minimize the risks posed by tsunamis through better risk assessment, planning, education, and warning communications. The certificate, when issued, is valid for 3 years. So far, 2 Caribbean countries have been certified Tsunami Ready. Anguilla has been certified twice since 2011, and St. Kitts and Nevis received certification for the first time in October.
I think one of the things that drove us in St. Kitts and Nevis was a what-if scenario where we lack an alerting mechanism, and the what-if scenario was, what if we got a tsunami, and what if it came in the night? Can you imagine? And so when we thought about it that way, we said, we really need to put certain mechanisms in place. And in starting the process, being recognized as Tsunami Ready allowed us several avenues to be able to achieve some of the goals and attain some of the resources, such as tsunami hazard signs, to be erected around both islands to be able to guide the population and help them to understand what type of actions might be required from them in the event that we are threatened by a tsunami.
What is important about it is that there's a set criteria that you have to meet. Basically about your abilities to receive tsunami warnings, what you do with the warnings when you get them, being able to disseminate the warnings to the public in time, as well as a big public education part to sensitize the public about tsunamis, as well as you see, signage of where it's safe to be and so forth and so on, where it's not safe to be, putting up signs. So basically the process was you had to go through the steps to make sure that you had a way to receive warnings 24 hours a day, a way to disseminate warnings to the public, and the public education and the signage.
We participated with Allen Harbour and Mars Vanderpool Primary School. We take them to the highest point, which is Navigation Hill, we make sure that the students walk and the teachers and parents walk from each school to Navigation Hill. It's not difficult because it's about 1.5 miles away from both schools, so it's not really difficult. And the last exercise we had, the children actually did it in record time. I think we do the exercises once every year, sometimes twice per year, but most likely once every year. It's very important because we live in a low-lying area, and a place like Pond Ground and East End, we are prone to flooding, and we flood very often based on our hurricane seasons. The members of the community take the exercise extremely seriously, very, very seriously indeed, especially the parents and the teachers from the school and also the children.
Becoming certified tsunami ready is no easy feat. It requires education and awareness exercises, mapping, signage, and drills. The overarching advice is to get community groups involved in the process from the very beginning.
When we first embarked on Tsunami Ready, we had a number of community meetings. And what we realized is that if it's not something sensational you're going to talk to the community about, the level of community participation that you get is not as great as you would like. And so we had to go back to the drawing board and think about different ways that we can engage with the community to get the message across. And we realized that a number of community groups exist within the various communities around the island. And so we decided to meet with those communities and go that route. We've started training members of the communities in the community emergency response teams, so that part of that is that they're not only about tsunamis, but all of the various hazards, so that they are aware of what they're supposed to do. But as it pertains to the tsunami aspect of it, we then use them to champion and push the cause.
Yes. The first thing will be for the authorities to talk to the local people directly, because authorities talk to authorities and people are left at the side, they will not understand. And also what we did in Mexico was to talk to people and ask them, how do you want to be warned? Because sometimes we abuse the technology and we assume and say now we could transmit information in a cellular phone. But if not everyone has a cellular phone or an intelligent cellular phone, or old people or kids don't know how to use it, it's not going to be useful. So in some places they told us that they wanted to have loudspeakers or sirens. In other places they said, use the bell on the church. So we know that when somebody is ringing the bell very loud, something is happening. So by talking to people, then we understand or we know what is the best way to advise them what to do. And what we've been promoting is to do a lot of drills, a lot of rehearsals with people, with young people, with old people.
Well, the program was rolled out in August. So far we held meetings with the various stakeholders. So we held meetings with the community members in Union Island, the Union Island District Disaster Committee. We also held meetings with the Rose Place community, and we're collaborating with the community group, the Universal Rastafari Movement, which is a community group that's very active in the Rose Place community.
A major concern for disaster officials is the location of some of the critical infrastructure.
I do not think we have dealt with very well. How do we move people in large numbers, especially those that are differently able? And so that is a challenge we have examined and are taking some steps to address. Presently we have schools that are in impacted zones, we have clinics, we have utility companies, we have desalination plants, we have hotels, and the list go on and on and on. The solution to making these facilities less vulnerable in some cases would require us moving them out of harm's way. In some cases, there are advances made in terms of science and how you can apply science in the built industry to reduce some of these risks. And so the solution really is a combination of things that we'll need to do. The government, in my view, should be leading the way. However, the private sector should be a very close and supporting partner.
From our perspective at the university, what can really make the difference in the long term is disaster risk reduction. So you do not keep adding assets in an exposed zone, because of course that's going to cause you problems in the future. So you really have to look at addressing the immediacy of the problem. It could happen at any time, but also the future of development in the country. Let us ensure that we are not exposing new development to the hazard. Disaster risk reduction measures can be either physical or they can be procedural, you would say. So we have our acts, we have our building codes, we have land use and zoning laws, we have regulations which govern setbacks and so on. All of these would be applied to reduce the risk. Now, unfortunately, it is the case in Jamaica and in other countries in the Caribbean that we don't enforce some of these laws. Hence, we see populations at risk in zones which they, in fact, are occupying illegally, but we do not do anything about it. So, one of the things we must learn to do is to enforce our laws and our regulations.
Among the earliest records of tsunamis in the Caribbean were one in 1886 near the Virgin Islands of St. Thomas and St. Croix, and another in 1967 which affected all of the islands in the chain right down to Grenada in the southern Caribbean, causing in some places waves as high as 2.4 meters, damaging boats and buildings. The most recent record of a Caribbean tsunami was in 2010, following the January 12th earthquake in Haiti. 7 people died as a result of that local tsunami. Here is how one can recognize and respond to the natural warning signs of a tsunami. Feel an earthquake and you are near the coast or the beach. See an unusual disappearance of water or an oncoming wall of water. Hear an unusually loud roar from the ocean. Run away from the coastline and beaches and try to go as far inland as possible and as high above sea level. Tsunamis can happen at any time and can be highly destructive, but disaster management officials say an informed and alert population is the best defense in tsunami mitigation. Remember, a tsunami can be destructive, but it doesn't have to be deadly.